What's going on, y'all? Another episode of Lit, the premier platform for all things literary, swaggy, and otherwise. I'm here with today's guest, the super swaggy, the super poetic, the badass himself, John Murillo. Welcome, brother. Welcome to this episode. Before we start, John pulled up straight like Lenny S, like Emery, with the post vacation outfit. Stand up one time. We got to see the outfit. We got the outfit cam. So take us through the fit, man. Cause you came through with the blue.
Let's see. I'm rocking Calvin Klein,
Woo.
Kenneth Cole, Cole Haan, Calvin Klein.
Hey, with the socks.
Yes, that's what I do.
This is where he came out, man.
Blue and white, representing that West Coast.
All right.
Yes.
All right. So, man, let's get right into it. So you say from the West Coast.
Yes.
The best coast, as they say.
Yes.
Where'd you grow up specifically?
Specifically, L.A. And then later on, like when I started getting to my teenage years and young adulthood, moved to what they call the Inland Empire. So like Pomona, Ontario, Rancho, that area. But always Southern California.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So talk to me about like your background for a little bit. Bring us into like the world of John Murillo.
Sure. First start with my peeps, half black, half Mexican, Blaxican, right? From Southern Cal. Grew up in the 70s and 80s when LA was really going through the beginning stages of its gang culture, right? So a lot of the writing that I do reflects that. It comes out of survival, right? And then even prior to that, you know, being the son of a Vietnam War veteran, one of the things I'm tackling a lot in the writing is what war does to families, right? So especially black families, right? So my pops had enlisted. He came out dealing with whatever he was dealing with.
He's black.
Yeah.
Your mother's Mexican. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So so that's pretty much what set the foundation. Grew up listening, loving hip hop. You know, those actually my first poets were MCs.
Okay.
So even now, even though I don't rap and I don't really write what might be considered spoken word things, my influences were still those early MCs who were lyric, narrative writers who used a lot of concrete detail in their writing, a lot of imagery, storytellers.
Yeah.
So that kind of really shaped my aesthetic early on.
So give me like, what was one of the first verses you remember, like clear cut?
I'd have to say, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, Melly Mel's verse, one of his verses on that song, New York, New York.
Okay.
Right? So it's, I think that's really, it's called The Message Part 2 is the official name of the song. So we all know the message, right?
Yeah. Broken glass everywhere.
People on the,
You just don't.
But there's this verse. I remember I got this cassette. It was The Best of Sugar Hill, something like that.
All right.
And it had this song on it. And I remember there's this late verse, and I actually have some of it, if I could read it.
Yeah. Bring that.
So later on, so he has a verse late in the song. The verse starts, "A baby cries and the mother dies, and the tears fall from the doctor's eyes. Because in this room, on this day, the good Lord has giveth and taketh away." So he goes on and on and on. But here's what got me, right? Mm-hmm. Way down here. So he's, let's see, start in. "They never took the time to tell you about sex, so you had to learn about it in the discotheques. 9 months later, the baby is there, and the nigger that did it said, 'I don't care.' You don't have enough money to help feed two, so you had to choose between the baby and you." Now this right here is the verse that got me. I'm about 12 years old, right?
Right. What year is this?
This is we gotta be 83.
Okay.
So 83, I'm 12 years old listening for music videos and things.
Yeah.
But this verse is so visual. Let's see. The nigga did this, "I don't care." Okay, blah, blah. "The sky was crying rain and hail when you put your baby in the garbage pail. Then you kissed the kid and put down the lid, and you tried to forget what you just did. The muffled screams of a dying baby was enough to drive the young mother crazy. So she ran in the rain trying to ease the pain. And she drove herself insane. New York, New York." So, you know what I mean? So, like, that whole verse, I was like, dang, I played it over and over, right?
Yeah.
Just the image of, like, the rain and the hail and just step by step how he was just kind of explaining the actions.
Right.
I was like, this is it. This is right here. This is my barometer. So any MC who didn't live up to that, I thought was whack. Right. And it's the same with poets. You know, it's like everything that you want from poetry is in that verse.
Yeah. So let me ask you. Listening to that was the immediate thing. Why not be a rapper?
Oh, it was.
Oh, okay.
It was, yeah, for years.
Okay.
Until we were in a studio. We used to push demos. We got our records or our demos played on local radio stations in Southern California. What happened was, you know, at the time there were no such thing as a 40-year-old rapper, right? So you started
rap itself wasn't 40.
Right, exactly. So you know, I'm starting to get of age, 21, 22. It's not really happening for me like I think it should, right? So I started thinking, okay, what am I going to do? I knew I wanted to write, okay? So at which point, started taking school more seriously, became an essayist, right? So my early literary influences then were Baldwin, Eldridge Cleaver, right? People like that.
This was what? Are you in high school?
Now I'm in college, community college.
And where are you?
I'm in California still. So this one I'm because I played basketball in high school.
Yeah.
You were good? No, I was just decent. I wasn't even really good, but the classes I had were remedial classes.
Yeah.
So even as a mediocre athlete, I was still in classes that they set aside for athletes. So I was up to my senior year in English class learning what a noun was, what a verb was. I had spelling tests my senior year. So I had to go to community college to really learn what I should have learned in high school. So while in community college is when I started really taking it seriously. The riots happened in 92. Right?
Yeah,
so I started thinking about, okay, what is my role, right? How can I use writing or whatever I'm into to really make a difference? And that's when I started getting into like the Afrocentric literature, the rappers at the time, you know, KRS-One, Big Daddy Kane, Rakim, right? So people who kind of, you know, gave me a sense of your art having a purpose beyond just, I don't know, the party or just pleasing people.
And it's interesting because it's like you're from the West Coast, but everyone you've named are East Coast rappers.
East Coast rappers. I used to have, actually, Ice-T was probably the only West Coast rapper I really messed with at the time.
Really?
Yeah.
You didn't bang with like Cube and
Cube. Yeah,
okay.
I got to give it to him too. And Cam. I don't know if you know Cam. He was out of Compton, this conscious rapper. But yeah, he was like a conscious gangster rapper.
Okay.
Yeah, he was
conscious gangster
rapper. Cam, Kam. You check him out.
Yeah, I gotta look him up.
But no, like a lot of my earliest influences were East Coast rappers. Okay. You know, even like Cool G Rap, Just Ice. You know, because again, I came with it. You know, it was about the lyrics. Yeah. But I don't think I'm alone in that. I think a lot of West Coast MCs, especially, you know, my age or maybe even older, would tell you a lot of their influences came.
Well, yeah, like that was like what Snoop Dogg literally did on the first album, like Slick Rick's, like,
right? Lottie Dottie,
like
exactly.
He just did the whole thing, but he did like put a West Coast spin on it. So that you start in community college in LA still. When do you make the transition to go to what's the space between this and going to NYU where you got your creative writing?
A lot of years. So
okay.
I graduated high school in 89.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, before I was born.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so, you know, I graduated 89 and then I'm hanging around community college. Back then, it was like $7 a credit, so you can take a class.
God damn.
Yeah, you can flunk it. You could not stop going. You know, it's only $21, right? So I didn't really take it seriously for a while.
Right.
Until, like I said, 92 happened. And then I went back and took
Were you involved at the, like, were you?
Nah, I wasn't.
You wasn't out there?
Nah,
oh, okay.
Nah. But it made me think of, you know, a lot of things. Because, again, you know, now it's commonplace, right? We see these videos, we hear these stories about, you know, cops killing and beating unarmed people, right? But this Rodney King, the video, that was the first time.
That was like, there was no precedence for that.
There's no precedence.
Yeah.
Of course, we knew people, you know, living in the neighborhoods, you know this goes on, but you had actual footage and you just knew that there's no way these cops could be acquitted.
Yeah.
So when that happened, right, and the whole aftermath, it really started me thinking as a young man, okay, what am I doing with my life, right? So I decided to take the community college piece seriously. 94, I transferred, I went to Howard. So that's how I got to the East Coast.
Okay. So
I was living in D.C., so I went to Howard.
Studying what?
Philosophy.
Okay.
Yeah. Philosophy major, Egyptology minor. And then after I graduated, I just stayed in D.C. I used to work as a bookseller, personal trainer, school teacher, elementary school teacher.
Yeah.
And at some point I decided, if I'm really going to give this poetry thing my all, I can't be working all these jobs. Because I used to keep 2 or 3 jobs at a time. And I said, I need to devote myself. So that's when I decided to go back to grad school.
Okay.
Now we're talking 2005. So I was actually at that point early to mid 30s.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so this whole time, were you writing on the side or like just doing like?
Yeah, I was writing. There was this group that I hooked up with in D.C. called the Black Rooster Collective. Actually, this is an anthology they put out. This is not really available anymore. But it's this group. It's 4 brothers: Ernesto Mercer, Brandon D. Johnson, DJ Renegade, and Gary Lilly, and a woman named Renee Stout, who was a visual artist.
Yeah.
Right. So a couple of these brothers who I came up under, they gave me exercises, gave me books to read, taught me what it is to live as a poet. Yeah. And so from then on is when I started like really, taking it seriously and devoting myself.
Okay. Do you remember like it's probably so far gone, but what was the first poem that you had written that made you go like that, like sort of connected for you, like this was actually how you were going to move and to put like poetry was where you was going to be?
Yeah, it was interesting. Well, 2 things. One, I went through this real nasty breakup, right? And I remember just writing down, it started out as a rap, and I wrote it influenced by Big Pun's song Punish Me, right? So it was kind of the cadence, but at some point, the rhyme scheme just kind of fell apart. I left it out, and one of my buddies was over the house, and he saw it. He's like, oh, you should go spit this at the local open mic. And I remember doing so, right? And it wasn't really well received, but something about that, it's kind of the process of exercising everything that was within me onto the page, right? Yeah. Having someone look at that and say, oh, this is pretty good, right? That was the first time I ever thought I could, actually do something like this. And then there was this brother named, he's still there in D.C., named Ethelbert Miller. You know Ethelbert?
Is older black dude?
Yeah.
I think he taught like Ta-Nehisi.
Yeah, he was a Howard.
He's like the guy.
He's the guy.
Yeah, he's the guy. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I met him at AWP.
So here's the thing: in DC, at the time, a lot of poets knew that he would be a hard critic of your work, right? He can greenlight you, or not in the sense of putting you on, but tell you, yeah, you got some chops, or you need to work. So I remember taking a poem to him, not that one, but a different one I'd written. He used to work at the African American Studies Center up at the top of the library. Moreland Springer Library at Howard. Yeah. We're walking up, you walk up 3 flights of steps, right? It's him in this room with all these books around. And I showed him a poem, and I said, he read it. I said, so do you think I can call myself a poet? He said, yeah, you can call yourself a poet. Basically, like, you can call yourself a porcupine. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But he was like, but you need to work. And it's funny because I don't know if he still remembers this. He told me to get the Princeton Encyclopedia of Poetic Terms. Mm-hmm. And you know how Malcolm X, how he taught himself to read by copying out the dictionary? Yeah. He said to do that. So I got this big-ass Princeton Encyclopedia, right? And I started copying out terms. And I ran into him on campus once, and I said, I'm halfway through E's. He's like, what you talking about? I said, the Princeton Encyclopedia. He said, oh, I was joking when I told you that. So at this point, I'm already, and I've copied about this much of the encyclopedia out. Right, but that's how bad I wanted it. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to really learn this craft and respect it. So, so he was, he's another guy who kind of, even with that, gave me the possibility this is something you could do, right? But as far as the work itself, I can't really pinpoint a poem of mine where I said, oh, this has some potential. It was really just people's reaction to it and encouraging me to kind of go forward.
And that's a visceral thing because I think that is so much of hip hop. Right, hip hop is so much about the crowd's reaction.
Sure.
And to even talk about a song without how people react to it is not talking about the full art form. Right, like even the battle it wasn't so much of what you said; it was how to cipher. Like,
absolutely, right.
Like I remember, I think there's a documentary called The Art of Rap.
Yes.
And Kanye was talking about how he had this complicated rap, and he was like, he said the boy came out, he was like, and I don't know what this. But you smell like piss. And he was like, everybody was like, just like, oh!
That's real.
He was so mad. And it was like, it was simple, but it worked. And I think that with a lot of, even what I try to do, like I write essays, I try, it took a certain amount of bravery for me to read them. There's this open mic that's popular in Harlem called hang night. The Heath Gallery is this black family that owns a gallery in Harlem, and they use their last Fridays to open up to the community, creators. And usually when people go to open mics, they do spoken word, they do music, they do poetry. And I was like, I don't really see an essay fitting in that, right? And so like, I'm like, you gotta really write some shit,
right,
to get people to just be like this. And so I became to learn it's like, how do I write for not a pandering reaction, but how do I get people to react the way I want them to?
Right.
And I think that that's a difference when people talk about audiences. I'm not trying to pander to an audience. But what I'm trying to do is like get the audience to really like fuck with what I'm doing, and really get them like, if you can fuck with what I'm doing, that means that the power is in really the pen. Right. So for you, what's ironic also about poetry is that as much as it's like sort of the most I think popular way that people think of writing, it's also like the least read of all the other like disciplines. So like fiction, the non-fictions, the historical books, like the essay collections. But poetry, people always make jokes. Like I saw a joke that was written by like I think Morgan Parker, who's like a brilliant poet. She was like that the poetry section in Barnes and Noble is right next to the bathroom. Like, so it's like little jokes like that like play on this. So how would you describe, to you, when you think about poetry, what language would you describe poetry in? How do you think about poetry?
How do I think about poetry?
Yeah, like how would you describe it? What gives you when you looking at something, what makes it a poem in your mind?
Sure. For me, you just mentioned it, right? That reaction in the cipher when people you hear a line, they react a certain way, right? It has to hit me, right? The way it hits me is here. It has to hit me in my gut first. I have students who write poems that are puzzles. They want to be cerebral, they want to be smart, they want to be witty, and all these things, right? But if you don't hit me in the gut, if I don't feel what you're writing, then to me it's not a poem. It might be verse, right? But it's not a poem. And it's funny, going back to, I want to make this whole thing about hip hop, but one thing I've been doing a lot recently is watching videos of dancers, right? Poppers, lockers, breakers. And I watch them dance, and I watch the crowd's reactions, okay? And the best of them, you could tell they've trained so long that all their movements are precise. Everything has a purpose, right? And almost every few seconds they're getting that reaction from the crowd. They're hitting them, okay? With poetry, I think it's similar in that a good poet will have taken such time with their language that there's no filler, right? Every line, if not every line, every couplet, or at least every stanza, there's something that elicits a reaction from the reader.
Right.
Okay. So that's what poetry is and what it does for me.
Okay.
It's something that hits me in the heart. And maybe if I want to go back and read and discover some of the other things that are happening in the poem, I'll do that.
Yeah.
But I have no patience or time for just puzzles and people who use poetry as a vehicle to show off their smarts or skills or anything.
Yeah, and I think that for me personally, I think that that's what's kept me sort of on the fence about reading a lot of poetry, because when you hear it, I think there's something visceral about sound, of hearing someone's voice communicated. Like if I read Sam Cooke lyrics, I'm not reacting if I hear his voice communicated. But that thing of what you said about it being visceral, I think that, to me, the way I even take art is like it has to be visceral. Like there has to be urgency in it. Like if I'm gonna listen to it and it's like, oh, that's cool, like that's not cool to me. Like it gotta make me feel like I remember, and I always talk, like when Get Rich or Die Trying, when 50 Cent's album came out, like I wanted to get in a car and shoot somebody. That moment. It wasn't I want to plot. It's like, I want to kill somebody right now. And it wasn't like, I'm not even a tough guy. So that was, to me, the man of, like, that was what the art did. It made you want to do something right then.
Absolutely.
Like, it was like, I got it. Like, I pick, even like this Jay-Z album that came out, like, it was like, man, I want to get me a CD. I want to look at IRAs right now. Like, right now. Like, don't got no money, but I'm looking at some IRAs. And so I really think that what art really does do, in poetry, especially, because what's funny is, and I talked to you about this, but what I realized, I think poets probably work the longest on poems. And I think that gets undermined because the poems are so small in themselves. Like, they're less words. They're like, the lines skip a lot of spaces, but because you're removing so much, you're spending more time about what needs to really be
Absolutely.
there, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that like the economy of words exists for poetry in a way that it exists for no other like art, like written form.
Sure.
And so like without going to, there was one poem in here. This is your first collection, right?
Yep.
This is the one and only right now?
So far.
Okay, so like Up Jump the Boogie. And I had like the first poem that like grabbed me. It wasn't even the poem, it was like the lines in Practicing Fadeaways. And you talk about, you say, what the boys who ran these courts wanted was a lie passed high enough to pull them into the sky, something they could catch in both hands and hang from, long enough for someone to snap a photograph to hold them there, skybound, risen. And I was just like, damn, like the way, to me it was like that double entendre of like, help me get to the next place I need to be in and then catch me there.
Sure.
Like catch me at my highest.
Right.
As opposed to always keeping me down. And I remember like, you know, growing up in the hood, like basketball, even though everyone wanted to be like playing sports, basketball I think was because it was that idea of defying gravity.
Right.
Like, that you could, like the jumper, like getting caught midair.
Yeah.
As opposed to football, you didn't really like, you know, you catch a Randy Moss catch, you jump everywhere. But that wasn't a part, that wasn't like essential to the game.
Exactly.
Like, you could just have hands, you know, you could catch, but basketball was definitely that thing of like, this dude is like defying the, like literally on the ground, like part of how you win that game is defying the odds.
Yeah. Defying gravity, flying.
Yeah. And so those are like, it's poems like that like I think about a lot because these are precisely the poems I did not read coming up, right? Like I didn't know who Amiri Baraka was.
Sure.
And in all my, you know, education about poetry, it was like you probably got some like Frost, you got like
right.
you know, Shakespeare, you got, but you didn't, I wasn't getting like the urgent poems.
Yeah.
So to me it was like, oh, this is like sing-songy, this is like Roses of Red, blah blah blah.
See, and this is the other thing too, right? To me, when we ask what poetry does, a buddy of mine, he said, I don't know if this is from him or if he was quoting, he said, poetry may not stop a war, but a poem might make someone put down a gun. Right? So it's the idea that poetry has real life consequences and use.
Right.
So you coming up as a young man in the city, there are poems out there that you didn't have access to that would have spoken to you, right? Would have kept you from one day to the next. You know, you're still here with us, but there are a lot of people who aren't. Right. So there might be poems that existed that, if nothing else, you might read a poem about somebody going through something with their pops, and it lets you know, damn, I'm not the first one to go through this, right? Maybe this might pass, right? So now, like when I came up, poetry wasn't really something that I was interested in because, again, like you, it was just, you know, your old Englishman, right?
Yeah.
There was nobody who looked like, sounded like, smelled like me.
Yeah.
Right? At least I thought.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was also nobody like getting the girls like
True.
with poetry. Like you could get a girl with poetry, but you weren't getting the girls. Like it wasn't in plural. Like I remember every high school talent show, like all somebody had to do was sing that Shy song.
Oh yeah.
And whoever hit that high note, I'm like, everybody gonna be on this guy for like the next week. So it was like that was one of the reasons why, even though I was like sort of, you know, always proficient at writing, it was like it never had that reaction. Like in fourth grade, like I remember I read a story and I learned the power of writing was when I read the story and the class was quiet and they were just kind of like, yo, like keep going, sort of thing. But it, you know, when you come, I was watching like literally this morning, I was watching like a old Martin Def Comedy Jam video and how like he had the whole Apollo like jumping out the gym. And it's like those, like when you come from that culture and that's how you measure reaction, it's like, if I could ever write something that could get like that riotous sort of like it sounds like people are beating in the door.
Yes.
Like that's why I was discouraged because it's like you see that, you know, you go to the Rucker, you know, the hood basketball game, somebody dunked the whole gym, like people climbing over the fences and jumping over.
Right.
You go to, you go to a, you know, what is it, like a concert, people jumping over, you know, people jumping in the crowd. Go to a comedy show, people doing that. Then you go to a reading, and it's like, and it's like that's cool, but it's like nah, that's not. I need that energy, right? Because I think that there's something very like to me even like African about the percussion of like that sort of thing. I'm like I want that.
It's called and response.
Yeah. So you in your poetry, right? This collection comes out at what point Jump the Boogie comes out at what point in your sort of career as a poet? So we know you go to NYU after you go to Howard, and then this is what year?
So this came out 2010. So about 3 years after I graduated from NYU.
Okay.
Right.
So it took you were working on this book for 3 years.
I was working on a book for about 7.
Okay.
Yeah. So even a lot of the poems from the book I wrote even before I got to NYU.
Okay.
Right. So I'm about 38 years old when I write this, and there's a lot happening. And personally, there's a sense that I'm late to the game because at 38, a lot of people, especially nowadays, they've had 4 or 5 books out.
Yeah.
Right. So I knew I wanted to come and still kind of represent where I come from and tell those stories that came from my young adulthood, but also this is a grown man writing the book too, right? So I'm not writing about a young man's journey as a young man. There's also some perspective that I hope that I've gained in the intervening years. It just the way the whole book came together. Willie Perdomo, you know Willie Perdomo?
No, put me on.
Willie Perdomo wrote this book, Where a Nickel Costs a Dime.
Okay.
This came out in the 90s.
And it has a CD. See, this is multimedia, man.
He was one of the dopest of the Nuyorican poets in the 90s and stuff. He's still doing his thing, writing strong poems. When I read this book, it gave me permission to kind of speak to...
Yeah, and that's dope because it does have this
the
same vibe, yeah.
When I read his book, it gave me a sense that I could tell my own story. He's from Spanish Harlem. Mm-hmm. And a lot of his stories come from that experience, right? I'm from the West Coast, but reading that... Because at the time when I read this, Saul Williams was the rage, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of his stuff I couldn't really relate to, quasars and lunar eclipses and stuff like that.
He on another, literally.
It was dope, but I couldn't relate. So I read Willie's book and I said, dang, okay, this is something I could do. So he was an early influence of mine. By happenstance, I run into him in Chicago. He's with another buddy of mine who introduces us. He asked if I have any work. I said, yeah. Send it to him. It wasn't finished. The book wasn't finished, but a couple weeks later, I get an email saying, "Hey, I want to publish your book. When it's ready, would you be down?" And I was a little reticent at first because again, the poems weren't finished. I don't know if I was ready because I came to this late, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm like, I still need to work on the craft a little bit, but I'm having conversations with people, and they're saying, "Nah, this is an opportunity. It's for you. There's someone out there who needs that book, who needs to hear your voice. Do it." And I'm glad I did. The book came out cool. It was pretty well received. And
now what when you say well received in the metrics of a poet's career, what does well received mean relative to where you are?
Sure, that's a great question. To me, well received means I'm at a conference, and this brother I don't know from Adam comes up to me and says, "Hey, I was going through something with my father. I hadn't talked to him in years, but I read that poem you wrote. And it made me reach out to my father. And he died soon after, but that gave me a chance to connect."
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So your poem made a difference in my life. So that someone young come up to me and saying, "Hey, reading your book," the same way Willie gave me permission.
Yeah.
My book gave other people permission to tell their own stories, right?
Yeah.
And explore and see what their lives are about. So to me, when I say well received, that's the kind of things. Those are the kind of things I'm talking about. Yeah. And then and then there was other stuff happening. Book sales, and it was a finalist for a couple of awards, things like that. But the real difference to me was when people would come to me with those personal experiences.
Yeah. And so when someone's reading, and I asked you this before at the Cave Canem 2020 event. But this I asked because I'm more and more trying to figure out how do we get this language to people who need it, right? How do you get more people to read these books to do these these connections? How would you encourage or how would you educate someone in reading you? How are they to read a John Murillo piece?
Honestly, it's funny, poets especially throw around this term accessibility like it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Right? And I want my work to be accessible. My boy Ernesto Mercer, he told me years ago, we were in this place called the Kaffa House in D.C. And he was like, and it was this Ethiopian restaurant, but then on certain nights he'd have poetry readings. And it was in the hood. So, people used to come through and not all of them would be your bohemian types, right? So he would say to me, you see that dude in the back with smoking a cigarette, you want to write the poem that hits him, right? Which reminds me of something Amir Baraka told his students. He would say, you want to be a poet, go to those construction workers over there, read them a poem. If you don't get hit in the head with a brick, you're a poet, right? So accessibility is important to me. I think that's how, it's in crafting language that doesn't try. I think a lot of people try to speak above people's heads. Right?
Oh yeah,
as if that's gives us some sort of, as if that gives it value, right? Only a few people can fuck with me, so therefore I must be on some elite shit, right? So I want people not to need instructions. Pick up the book, open to a page, and start reading. Right. And maybe they're very literal readers. They get something. Maybe they're readers who can get to the second, third, and fourth layers of meaning if they're there. Maybe they're people who read into my book stuff that I didn't even know was there, right? But ideally, I will have done my work on my end so that the reader doesn't need a roadmap. You see what I'm saying?
But so many readers do, right? Like,
I don't know.
When you think about, like, you got to think, I think when you think about in contrast, and I say this to a lot of people, and they go, well, that's different because that's sports, that's visual. Like, you see that, right? So the example I constantly give is the one of Vince Carter in the dunk contest where he puts his arm in the rim. And when he does it the first time, no one reacts. Like, people are just kind of confused. And then the replay, and then the replay. Sure. And then, in addition to the replay, the language, and then the replay, and then the language.
Right.
And then it's like, now you can appreciate what he does. And I think that in addition to the immediate language, like, I could throw the ball off the backboard and then spin around and do that.
Sure.
But if there's no language for what that is, people like, wait, what? I think what happens is a lot of the things we do in the world get so we're so sometimes ahead. We take that for granted and are falling behind. Meaning, like, it's like if I know I'm ahead, I know I'm gonna have to catch you up.
Right.
Because I'm such on another level. Like,
Sure.
I know when Vince Carter did that, it's not like he was like, I'm about to put my arm on the rim. Because it's like, what does that look like? It's not, I'm going to show it to you. And I have to trust that there's an apparatus that's going to, like, sit there with it. And, like, dissect. Like, do you know what it really takes to do that? Do you know what it takes to jump from the free throw line? Like, when you're watching Jordan in the first games, it's like, yo, this dude is... But you don't really have, like, an understanding of, like, what am I... Like... It's a freak show when you don't have the language. But when you have, like, and I watch, like, ESPN has this thing, sports science. Like, they literally broke it down so you can appreciate, like, no, that guy is not just jumping. Do you know what it takes in your body for it to do? And you like, damn.
Right.
Then you start to appreciate, oh, this is why this person is the best. And that's, to me, like, with poetry and just all writing in general, like, I've realized that I've had to do that more for myself. Of, like, no, what am I really doing? Like, fuck what I think I'm doing.
Sure.
What am I actually doing, and how do I give somebody, like, a syllabus to sort of, like, understand, like, okay, when I read, like, when I listen to, when I read this, how am I reading this? And how am I failing in my reading? Am I succeeding? When do I successfully read a John Murillo piece? When am I failing at reading a John Murillo piece, right? So, like, that's...
Yeah, I think, like you said, there are levels to this, right?
Right.
So even if you take the Vince Carter example... The more you study it, the more you slow down the film, the more you analyze it, you get different layers of appreciation, right? But people who see that first, boom, right, it's hanging there like that, right? They get something out of it, right? I'm thinking of music. I'm thinking of how someone might listen to a John Coltrane solo and be moved by it, may not have the language to know why they're moved by it, right? But there's something that grabs them. And then later on they come back, they can read up on his life, they can maybe even study a little bit of jazz history, technique to know what it is, why it's dope, right? So with the writing, I don't think it's dissimilar. I think that even for the quote unquote untrained reader,
right?
For me, what I want is for them to be able to open this book up and don't know why they want to throw it across the room, but be like, damn, right? This is the shit right here. Of course, your experts, they could tell you, well, it's because of the rhythm, how, the lines and the narrative progressions happening and blah, 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 right? But I think there's something, and I believe that excellent art, no matter the genre, no matter the medium, can have that immediate impact on people, right? Vince Carter, I remember I was sitting around, I don't know if this is the World Games one year when he jumped over the French guy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Straight clear.
So we're sitting there talking. We're eating, and then he jumped over the guy. He dunks, takes off 2 feet. Boom. And we just stopped. We're like, did we just think we did we just see what we thought we saw?
Yeah.
And then they replayed it, right? He takes off, he comes baseline, he sees the dude, 7-foot Frenchman, lines up to take the charge, and Vince Carter just rises up above him, clears him. The guy's taking a charge, closes his eyes, and next thing you know, Vince is behind him. Bah, dunks, starts beating his chest. One of the illest moments ever. I watched that clip over and over and over again, and the more I watched it, the more I appreciated it. Because not only what it took physically, but for him to come baseline, look this man in the eye, look the basket, and be like, I'm about to jump over you.
Yeah.
That moment right there, he was God.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so I'm looking at that, and so there are levels that I can appreciate that maybe someone who just saw that clip once wouldn't.
Right.
But it was still a hell of a dunk.
No, absolutely. And I think that's, to me, it's the thing with poetry and like with all art. And then it's also looking at the fact of like, if poetry is as good as it is, and we know it is, it's like, then why are people not reading it? And it's like, I don't believe that it's only necessary. I don't think it's because the poetry is bad. I don't think because people are stupid. I just think that there is like this gap that people are not thinking about that bridge. And maybe that's not really like something only, that's not only the responsibility of the poet, right? Like, like it's not like Vince Carter explained why he dunked the ball.
Right.
It was, you have announcers, right? And so I don't know what that looks like in literature to where like someone can help people translate how to understand it. But what I understand about poetry, like, and I always give this example, and you've heard the example of like sometimes reading the way I've been taught poetry, and I think this is true for a lot of people who are taught poetry. You get taught poetry, you get one poem from one person at a time, and I've always described that as like, that's meant like hearing James Brown speak once, like Zamanisa. Wow. And then like he just walks out the room and you're like, what the fuck is James talking about?
Right.
But then you get to hear albums and you get to hear, and that's why I understand like poetry's art collections, because you can't, it's not what one poem is doing, it's what these poems are doing. Right. So it's a presence, right? Not a past tense, but a present tense that's always moving forward. But this has taken me, I have a privilege of being like around poets, people who are in conversation, who are doing that. The average person is not hanging out with a poet, right? That's not what their everyday looks like. But the everyday person knows somebody who's either had a hoop dream, or was bowling, or they even had a hoop dream. So like, it's like you watch the playoffs and like you're in the barbershop, like everybody in there going to tell LeBron like, oh, he shouldn't have passed it. But it's at the same time, it's like they're watching, so they're not at that level to make that play. But everyone thinks they're capable of making that play.
They're engaged in something.
Yeah, and that's what I want more for like literature, is people to have that sort of that audacity to feel like they own it, right? Like when people describe their basketball teams, they don't say, "Oh, the Goldens," they say, we going to the championship." Sure. And I'm trying to figure out like, how do we bring that to like to poetry when people take. Like, this is my, like, I'm a part, like, this is my poem. Like, right. We just won a National Book Award for poetry. It's like, it ain't worth shit. But it's like, but when you get that, like, that sort of moral, spiritual investment into your work, I'm thinking about, like, how you do that. And I don't think that that's necessarily, like, something that only the poem does. I feel like by the time you get to the book, you're there. Yeah. But everything between getting you there, I think that is part of, how do we think about that, right? Because I like, once you open the book, you already have enough that even got you to open the book. But I think that what doesn't get looked at is like, how do you even get somebody to do that with your book?
I think part of it, stuff like this, right? This is a medium that allows, or that will allow people access, right, to the writers. And it's not just, this two-dimensional object. There's a person that was behind this, right? There's a whole life and a history that went into making this piece of art. So this, if nothing else, is an effort to reach out to the people, right? Sonia Sanchez is always big on that, going to where the people are, right? She says, okay, you're writing in Poetry, Plowshares, the New Yorker, right? But what about the stuff they read? Publish a poem and TV guide. Right. Go into the barbershop. Don't have your reading just, in the Ivy Towers. Go to the barbershop and read, right? Go read poems where people are. So that's part of that, to me, this is part of that, which isn't very different from what the Black Arts Movement poets and playwrights did too, right? We're going to take it to where the people are.
And into the medium too.
Yeah.
Because I could tell you, like, when I used to, my barbershop that I used to go to was on Lexington and Malcolm X, and it got closed down. And I would take essays there sometimes, and I try to get people in, because the immediate thing is you want the hood to fuck with you. It's the same thing, like when Richard Pryor was hanging out with Red Fox. He was in Harlem, and Richard Pryor was Richard Pryor at that time.
Right.
But he wasn't Richard Pryor to black people. Like, they were, he was walking down the block and people were like hanging out the window, Zorro, Zorro. And he was like, I want that.
Right.
I want that from my people. I don't, you get it from white people. It's like, it's cool, but it's like, it's not the same. And so, like, I wanted the hood to fuck with me. And so I would try to give people my essays, like, get out of here, little nigga, with them essays or whatever. And I remember one day, like, there was a day where there wasn't as many people in the barbershop or whatever. And I was like, I'm just going to read it. And I started reading it. And people were like, I fuck with that. And then one of the dudes came to me after, and he was like, yo, one of the reasons why I told you, like, get out my face was because I don't know how to read. And it never dawned on me that was the thing, right? So it's like, it's also that assumption that just because you're capable of it, that means someone else is equally capable. And so my thing became like, damn, like, all right, how do I translate this? I have a sister, she has 4 kids. I send her books. She don't read them because she has 4 kids. So sometimes it's like, all right, I got to read this to her. So it's like, thinking about different mediums that access people, right? This, how many songs have you hated or necessarily didn't care for? Then you saw the music video and you was like, I see it now. Like before it was, or you see it in concert, and I think that, like, the medium, I think that poetry and writing can move in different mediums and extend themselves to other mediums. That would, like, that is part of meeting people where they are. Like,
and the thing too, the voice, right? What you're talking about, you voiced that essay, right? And poets, when we read our poems, that's something that I think it allows people a different way to access the poems. Right? It's an investment to sit down with a book and read it, right? But to show up and just kind of hear some words kind of resonate in the air, I think that's another way that works too. Yeah.
I wanted you, just so, because one of the poems, if you could lend voice to one of my favorite poems in here, is the one where you go with your pops to the movie theater. And I think that has a brilliant voice. Trying to Enter the Dragon. It is, right? If you don't mind reading that for me, brother.
Sure.
This is 1976, Los Angeles, California.
That's right. So you probably know your viewers. Into the Dragons, the Bruce Lee movie came out in 76, and in the movie there was this character played by Jim Kelly, who was, for us, the closest thing, or one of the closest things we had to an icon, right? I mean, handsome brother, perfectly round afro, karate man, right? And there's a scene in the movie where, and I can't remember because it happens to 2 of his movies, but whether he was walking down the street or driving, but he gets accosted. He gets pulled over by some cops, a squad car. And I think they've been sent by some henchmen or something. So they're not really out to do justice. They're out to beat his ass. So they pull out their billy clubs, and he whips them all up, karate, and drives off in the police car. And I remember being in the theater with my father and other men, and just how they were kind of watching that and the pride that it filled them with. So that's where this poem takes place. Into the Dragon. For me, the movie starts with a black man leaping into an orbit of badges, tiny moons catching the sheen of his perfect black afro, arc kicks, karate chops, and 30 cops on their backs. It starts with the swagger, the cool lean into the leather front seat of the black and white he takes off in. Deep hallelujahs of moviegoers drowning out the wah-wah guitar, salt and butter high fives, right on, brother. And daddy, glowing so bright, he can light the screen all by himself. This is how it goes down. Friday night, and my father drives us home from the late show. 2 heroes Cadillacing across King Boulevard. In the car's dark cab, we jab and clutch Jim Kelly and Bruce Lee with popcorn breath, and almost miss the lights flashing in the cracked side mirror. I know what's under the seat, but when the uniforms approach from the rear quarter panel, when the fat one leans so far into my father's window I can smell his long day's work, when my father, this John Henry of a man, hides his hammer, doesn't buck, tucks away his baritone, license and registration shaking as if showing a bathroom pass to a grade school principal. I learn the difference between cinema and city, between the movie house cheers of old men and the silence that gets us home.
Yeah, that's that. And that's real, right? And that's, to me, what's always tragic about, like, books is, like, when you read them, like, I told myself before I read Native Son, it was nothing like that existed. And then you read it and you're like, fuck, like, this exists.
Right.
Because I had, when I read that book, the first thing I had seen reading Native Son was Juice. And my, like, the fear that, like, was, the fear was really where the plot started. And, like, you get to a place where it's like, fuck that, I'm not going to be afraid. But that's a fear telling you to not be afraid anymore. And so, like, how fear dominates that narrative, and it's like, I only thought that fear playing out only made its way to the cinema. So when I saw it in a book, and then I took a Black history, like an African American lit class, and I read, like, Alice Walker's, and it's like, all this shit that I said didn't exist, which is why I didn't do this work. It was like, all this stuff is there already, in abundance, like, too much. And so for me, I'm like, damn, like, I got to do this work. But then it's like, how do I get people, how do I create a mass sort of thing that gets people to want to do the work? Is, you know, that was my thing when we was in college. Like, it was like, you know, getting people to party was not hard. Getting them to the party was hard. If you could, like, once you got them to the club door, they was going to pay whatever. They was going to pay the 20. They already got dressed. They already pre-gamed. They already talked about it. But it was like, to get them to do that one thing, those three things had to come first. And so my question for myself, and I think, like, you know, that's one of the reasons why this show to me is, like, going to be fundamental to that, is, like, I realized that, like, our medium of writing is, like, that's one element of the art of writing. Like, to me, I think this conversation is a form of writing. Is a narrative. It's a, like I said, it's a way, it's an appendix to understand the things that goes on literally between the lines. Right. Like, the same thing in poetry. Like, to be able to understand that poem is not just a matter of reading the language. It's about understanding how language creates bodies. Right? Like, as a Black man who can, in a moment, one of the reasons why that scene is so powerful is because he has to tuck his gun. But if in real life he's not tucking his gun, does that scene even, if it bring out that sort of reaction? Because if you see that every day, it's like, oh, like, that's life. But if you don't see those scenes every day, you got to tuck your own. Like, when the guy that doesn't tuck his own, that's the guy that's like Jim Kelly. Like, that's, I think, to me, like, that's what was so beautiful about the interplay between that, is because it's like they're symbiotic. It's like, you know, part of why Jim Kelly is so big is because so many men can't be Jim Kelly in their own lives. Right. That's what makes a superhero. Right.
And our superheroes, you know, there's always something of the anti-hero in them too, right? Because they're anti-establishment. You know, we were talking about at the Kavikanam thing, the blaxploitation era. And how most of those films had that bad nigger archetype in them, right? Even what's that film with Jimmy Cliff, The Harder They Come?
I ain't see that.
You gotta see it.
My father was big on, like, and that was, and like I said, like, my father was so big on fucking blacks. Like, I had to watch all of them. Like, one of my favorites is what, Cotton Comes to Harlem. That was the, like, those was like masterpiece. Like, anything that put, like, Black men at the center of, they were the driving force of the plot. It was what my father wanted me to see at a young age. Like, he wanted me to see that I was the center. Which, you know, comes with some blowback, because then you only see yourself as a center and not, like, women at all and things like that. But it was like, it was definitely a step away from, like, seeing white men as a center and seeing myself as, like, seeing myself as the Tito Jackson in my own life. Like, he wanted me, like,
at best.
He was like, he's like, no, you Michael. Like, I want you to understand that you're Michael.
Wow.
And that, I think that is what creates, like, that reaction, is that so many of us, like you said, at best we get to be Tito, maybe Randy or Marlon, or whoever. So wanted to talk to you about, you are married to one of the most beautiful / dopest women in poetry, Nicole Seeley. How did that happen?
I got game, bro.
All right, okay. But she a poet too, so I mean, she got equal game. So like, did y'all meet over poetics?
How that happened? We met at a friend's book party. You know, I've been hearing about her through this, similar circle. She'd been hearing about me, and I wouldn't say
as you're talking.
I wouldn't say it happened around. Yeah, I appreciate it. Poetics so much as we just keep similar circles. That's how we met.
Yeah, and
just over time we started kicking it, and at some point I just decided, or I realized, that it's a Barack Obama quote. We are the ones we've been waiting on. Yeah. She was the one I've been waiting on all these years.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, man. And it's been good. It's been good. Matter of fact, I was going to mention her because we're talking about how to take the poems out to the people.
Yeah.
She did this reading last night with some kids in Jersey. Some of them from Newark. Some of them I think from Jersey City. And a lot of the kids were, I think about 20 kids, 14 of which may have been young black girls, right?
Right.
And you should have seen the reception. She gets there, and before she even, reads her first line, they say, "You look pretty tonight. We like your hair," right? So they're seeing someone who looks like them doing something that they may not even have considered that they are able to do. So she's reading these poems. She has this Q&A with them. And afterwards, you should have seen these little girls just around her. And you could tell there was something special in that moment. They weren't just seeing a poet. They were seeing a poet that I could be, right? Yeah. Those visuals are really important. So doing that kind of work, I think, is really important. Whether it pays well or not, whether it pays at all or not, right? Going to where the people are. And one of the things that really drew me to her was that she's about that life.
Yeah.
She's about the people, and really her whole life is a mission, right? How can she best serve,
right? And
it was just dope.
And I think what's admirable about her, and she's the executive director of the Cave Canem, is that so much of her own self is she doesn't like to be the person in the limelight. True. She has to constantly reach for something greater than herself to even pull herself into a direction where she's in a situation where she's like, if she had it her way, she wouldn't be that person.
Right.
And so that's what even makes it more admirable, is that you can make it look easy, but that takes a toll on you. And that's like, it's something admirable. But before we begin to, come to a close, I want you to work you through this new drink that we concocted. My little sister and I came up with it. And it's called Marduce. Marduce. It's a mix of Martinelli's and Duce. So I had one a little bit earlier before you came.
Okay.
We earlier interview, but what we want you to do.
I got lotion on my hands.
All right. I popped that up for you.
Yeah.
If you don't hear that sound, that means somebody opened your thing. Don't drink it.
Right.
So drink. You're gonna drink a little bit past the leaf.
Okay.
Right. Get that going, and then. All right, you thirsty? Okay.
I was thirsty.
All right, boom. Then we just give you that a little bit more.
Okay.
Then you're gonna swirl that around, and I'm gonna drink with you on this one because you gotta get that. Boom.
All right.
Bow. Thank you for being on Lit, bro.
Yes, sir. I like that.
Yeah. That's smooth. That goes down smooth. So before we get out of here, I need you. Everyone who doesn't know, I first heard this poem at the Cave Canem 2020. Lorraine had did this beautiful poem with a what was it, celloist or bassist?
Cellist, yeah.
The cellist. And then he came right behind her with this poem that's like signifying. I was talking to my man Danny about him, trying to explain to him like signifying was, and like it playing with the dozens and like the Dolomite, like way down in the jungle deep. And John did this poem called the autobiography.
The Ballad of Stagolee.
The Ballad of Stagolee. It's a dope poem. I like pleaded with him like, please read it. He gonna read it for us now. The Ballad of Stagolee. Pay attention. watch and listen is about to be lit.
All right. So this is it's a longer poem.
Okay.
Right. So y'all settle in. All right. So just a little bit of background. We were just talking about the archetype, right, of the black anti-hero.
Right.
So Stagolee from Blues lore is one of the prototypes of the archetype, if you will, right? So this is an adventure, one of his adventures. And so he's a character that pops up like signifying monkey, Stagolee, who else? Shine, right? In various poems in the oral tradition. So I wanted to do my take on it. The Ballad of Stagolee, or variation on a theme by Sterling A. Brown, with a slight nod to Etheridge Knight, who I actually brought one of his books too. Yeah. Part 1. Hear ye, pull up a chair and sit still. I got bubble gum and time and a story to tell. Well, I'm fresh out of gum and have some place I gotta be, but listen close, I'll be quick about my main man Stagolee. Now once upon a midnight, Stagolee left the house of Harlem's finest, grinning cat with the proverbial mouse. You won't believe it, but Pimpin' Stag for once thought he might put a ring on the last woman he bedded that night. He thought about her smile, thought about her lips, thought about her wide West African hips. Stag stopped to light a square, thinking about her hair, and heard, "Nigga, drop that cig and get your hands in the air." The king was interrupted, ruminating about his queen, by 6 cops in one car, pointing guns and looking mean. They had blue guns, black guns, long guns, short guns, all sorts of guns. Don't show up in the report guns. Stagolee stood steady in the street lamp glow, blowing smoke goes and leaned against a pole. He thought to himself, these motherfuckers must got me confused for an unarmed black man. Trust. I'm Stagger fucking Lee with the wild fofo, about to send 6 rockets through these pigs' car door. Just then a cop shouted, "Nigger, can't you hear?" Stag said, "Nah, sir, I can't. Could you come a little near?" A crowd started forming, coming closer to see. One woman whispered, "Do they know they fucking with Stagolee?" The wrinkled one, used to keeping blacks under boot, used to smacking around and shaking down for loot, stepped his old ass out the car, he did, his old bones creaking. Then he started speaking. "Boy, you must don't recognize the badges in the car. You must not see the gats. You know who we are? You know where you at? When we say stick your hands up, you stick 'em." Another cop said, "Let's beat 'em and kick 'em." The other 4 cops hopped out the funky ride, slid their pistols into holsters, pulling whackers from their side. One shouted, "Show ID." One hollered, "Hands in the air." One bellowed, "Butt on the ground." One stammered, "Stand right there." A short, fat cop reached for his waist to get some mace. Stag took a drag and flicked a cig in his face. The old cop faltered, but a rookie felt bold, thought he might slide up and try that old chokehold. Wannabe Marine, still on that few good men hype. Stag's razor cut a thin stripe straight across his windpipe. More people gathered, those on parole scattered. Some carried banners reading Black Lives Matter. YouTubers took video, hippies chanted peace. A few with fresh welts sang "fuck the police." Pop, 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 rat-a-tat in the air. "Calling all cars, we need help over here. We got a nigger cornered, far as we can see." Dispatch asked, "Then what's the problem?" Cop said, "His name is Stagolee." 2. Helicopter lights showered millions of cops. Armored trucks, snipers perched on tenement tops. They shut down the block, barricades and yellow tape. There seemed to be no way Stag could make an escape. Stagolee hunkered down behind a brick wall with his cell phone dying and nobody to call. In his coat he had a flask, Desert Eagle, a few clips, a half pack of ports, one he flipped to his lips. The standoff lasted well past the break of dawn. The police chief reached for the captain's megaphone, said, "Stagolee, I'm tired and my patience is thin. You got 10 seconds, nigger, to turn your black ass in." Stagolee took a swig from his flask of gin and began to think what this country asks of men. Stand here, go there, don't be too big or too black. He thought about the water hoses, police dog attacks. He thought about Amadou Diallo, Emmett Till, Oscar Grant at Fruitvale, Mike Brown and Sean Bell, Prince Jones Jr., Eric Gardner, Rodney King, Freddie Gray, Tamir Rice, long list, and that's the thing. Stagolee knew they had no plans to let him walk. He knew they had him measured for the bags and chalk. Even innocent men couldn't breathe and walk free. He thought, let alone me, gangsta ass Stagolee. He took another swig, dragged on a cig, then popped a shot over the top of the wall and the boss cop dropped. Bedlam in panic as the pigs ran frantic, Stab kept blasting on some one-man gang shit. He unloaded, swore, then reloaded his 44, lit up 10 more and the rest hit the floor. Police pissed their pants up and down the boulevard, SWAT team begged the mayor, call the National Guard. Days flew past, tear gas, and now tanks. To get Stagolee, the city broke the bank. The president, too, sent special forces and SEALs. When asked, the Pope said, by God, that nigga's just too real. Still, a Desert E clip only holds but so much, and the soldiers wouldn't get close enough to touch. Then the assistant to the assistant pulled the mayor aside and said, if you don't want him alive, think Philly in 85. You don't mean Eureka, cried the mayor, and before long a lone drone sliced the air, circled wide while the cops tried to clear the block, then hovered, a hummingbird with the missiles cocked. The mayor gave the gladiator sign, thumbs down. The drone set its sights, then exploded mid-flight. Holy fuck, the mayor yelled, duck, run for cover. Stagolee looked up and saw his number one lover. On the rooftop, leather bodysuit, a bazooka fro blowing in the wind. Stag said, "Aw, sookie, sookie." And she wasn't alone. She'd brought the Panther Brigade, singing "Get Up, Stand Up." Stag knew he had it made. She rode the zip line in smooth to save the day. Her name was Nikki Black, from down Apopka way. 3. Lottie Dottie, boy, Nikki Black sure had a body. The hottie said, "Get ready," then tossed Stag a shotty. 12-gauge sawed-off pistol grip, "Hold this." Then she winked and blew Stagolee a go-to kiss. Now I said I'd be quick, but here's where all gets good. Nikki Black had gathered up all the boys in the hood. Homegirls with hand grenades put pistoleros in place. A santero sang and killed a couple goats just in case. They lit Pirellis on fire at each end of the street, bottled gaseous rags flung at riot cops' feet. Stag said, "I can last at least some years and some days." That's when the president balked, said he had golf to play. Ronald K. Chump left the mayor out to dry with his bullets run low and 2 tears in each eye. The mayor cried, "Mr. President, motherfucker, can't you see? I can't do it alone. That's that nigga Stagolee." Then Chump said, "You're fired, bigly, and I quit." Then signaled for his limo with the spoiler kit. His limo pulled up, he jumped in. But rewind, and let me tell you about the genius of the jet black mind. See, while the president bickered with the mayor and cops, one rebel snuck Stag and Nick a bag of props. Nikki Black put on a mustache and a suit that was whack. Stag in drag, dress in wig, sashayed away out the back. Stag chloroformed the drivers, homies held down the goons. Nikki Black phoned the prez and said the car would come soon. He saw the red bob wig and sequins on Stag's dress, then hopped his ass right in and started groping for breasts. He reached high and low to grab as much as he could, and turned snow when Stag said, "Hey yo, partner, what's good?" Chump had the bass in his face, a big old yam in his hand, some chili chrome to his dome, but still did not understand. So Stagolee cleared his throat to break it down in a rant, but Nikki Black shot the prez and was like, "I'm sorry, I can't." They left the limo running with its presidential plates. Nick said, "We can still catch Shaft, and Cheryl's is open late." And by the time they found the limo with the chump in the trunk, Stag and Nick were back in Harlem, high and half drunk.
That's that shit right there. I love that fucking got me clapping off camera. So, what I'm interested in, who, if this could be made, right? Let's say this was made into like a movie. Who do you see playing Stagolee?
Wow.
Got me rhyming out here like that.
It was to be somebody with like kind of a Sam Jack vibe to him, but young, right? So a young Sam Jack.
Young Sam Jack.
Yeah, I think maybe what's that guy's name? Anthony Mackie. I could see him doing something like that. Yeah.
I was, you know who I had in my head? I had Mahershala Ali.
Who did? Oh, yeah,
Moonlight.
yeah. I can see that.
Yeah.
That'd be dope.
I definitely see him.
Yeah.
And how long did it work? Because this is also what I want to do. How long did it take you, from what you read, how long did that take you?
So, well, it's still in progress right now.
Right.
There's some things I want to clear up towards like the second, third, and onward. I want to kind of clear the language up a little bit.
Yeah.
Add some nuance. But the first draft, like the first section, came out pretty swiftly.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't, right now, see, it's in quatrains, right? So
Yeah.
I have a rhyme scheme going, 4 lines, A, B, rhyme scheme.
Mm-hmm.
When I first wrote it, it was just in couplets, like bars,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then when I had it in bars, the rhythm was really getting away from me. So what I did when I chopped it up into 4-line stanzas, I was able to kind of manage the music a little better,
Yeah.
right? So that happened, and then later on, some other narrative elements started working its way. Some stuff wasn't working, I had to throw out. So this, and then too, what I'll do is I'll work on a piece and I'll set it aside for a while if I'm stuck on it.
What's a while? Like,
It depends on the piece, right? So for this,
Yeah.
I had it. I was working on it for like a couple months. It got stuck, so I set it aside. I might come back to it a couple months later,
Yeah.
right? If nothing's jumping out of me, because I have a lot of poems in the works at once.
Yeah.
I'll set it aside. So I might have stepped away from this for about maybe 4 months. I came back, started tinkering a little bit more. And then I had a couple rushes where like whole passages started coming out all at once.
Yeah.
Set it aside. So one thing is kind of disappointing when you think you have the thing finished and you come back and you can still see some cracks, right?
Yeah.
Things. And the thing too is I'm not trying to make this necessarily, a masterpiece where there aren't any flaws in it. But again, going back to the pop lockers I was talking about, right? What I want from my poems is the same thing that they get out of their movements, where nothing's wasted, right? Every move that leads into the next one is doing something purposeful.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to make sure there's nothing wasted in this poem.
Yeah. And the reason why I asked that question is because
That's
when
good,
people,
by the way.
the reason why I asked that question is because sometimes when you look at a poem, you get it finished, and you don't get to see what goes into it. So you hear a 3-minute song, you think, well, it took 3 minutes. How long could it take it? When so you hear like somebody taking it, well, it took 10. Like we had this beat for 10 years, and then and it's like that 3 minutes expands into a universe.
Sure.
And I think poetry is the same way, where it's like a poem could be 4 lines, but those 4 lines probably took 4 years.
Right.
And so it is a different level of appreciation when you get to see what actually goes into it, and that's why I asked you.
Yeah.
Before we get out of here, I know when I met John originally at the Pen Awards at
That's right.
New School probably like a year and a half ago, and I had admitted to him that at that time I did not know personally a lot of black writers. Like I knew who like white writers, the literary establishment knew of who was black, because like I said, like in my own life, the closest to a writer we had, and I'm not quoting it, but like honestly, like a writer was like the rappers, like that.
Right.
Those were my writers. So I had asked you for your literary swag back then, and I wanted to know, has your literary swag, your 3 favorite writers and your 3 favorite clothing lines, has that changed from when I talked to you?
I would say yes, right? My foundational writers are going to be who they are, right?
Yeah.
But recently I've been reading a lot of Brother Larry Neal.
Okay.
He was a contemporary of Mary Baraka's.
Okay.
And it kind of ties into the whole conversation. What I'm after now is the work that reaches people, right? And not only that draws from the people. So one thing that I'm noticing, I'm relearning about Larry Neal's work, right, is that he used the idioms, the rhythms of his community.
Yeah.
Right. He drew from their references. So I'm returning to him. So he's becoming a lot very important to me. There's this Filipino poet who's a good friend of mine. This guy Patrick Rosal.
Okay.
You might want to get him on here. He's dope. But when I think of someone who's able to balance the rigor and craft of what people call academic poetry, right, with the fury, rage, duende, and having something to say and connect to the average everyday person, he's probably the poet I think who hits closest. Him, Dwayne Betts, who I was telling you.
Yeah.
Nicole
He wrote the
C.
Reagan era, Bastards of
the Reagan era. Yeah. So what I'm starting to do now is kind of rediscover my literary family, right? Because it's easy, you read widely, you have diverse tastes. It's easy to maybe get yourself to lose yourself, right?
Yeah.
So as far as designers, I'm starting to get into hats a lot lately. So Gorin Brothers, I like a lot of stuff they do.
Okay.
Still, Oswald Boateng is my favorite men's clothing designer.
Okay.
I can't afford any of his bespoke suits, at this point. But at some point, I hope to.
Yeah. I mean, this show. I mean, I think after that Stagolee, so the books might move. You might
right?
Oswald might hang out with you. Like, yo, man, I read that at something.
Right,
we get you, hook you up. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And then the last one. You said Oswald, and then.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of in a in between stage where I've been thinking a lot about this book Dandelion, right? The tradition of the black dandy, and where I fit into that. I don't consider myself a dandy at all, but I do like to look nice, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm in a stage where I'm thinking about clothing as something that to wear in such a way it doesn't get noticed in and of itself, but I get noticed in the clothing.
Yeah.
Right. So now I'm kind of back to the drawing board and just kind of like looking at different designers and things
and seeing how you could bring the silhouette.
Sure.
All right. So, where can people find? I know you're teaching in Massachusetts, right?
Yes, I'm at Hampshire College.
Okay.
Up in Massachusetts, Amherst, Massachusetts. I teach. I'm going to be starting at the Sierra Nevada Low Res MFA program soon.
You're going to do that? That's like spatially.
Yeah. But the low res programs, you just go 10 days in January, 10 days in June, and the rest is correspondence. And I'm in the city, so I'm here in Brooklyn. I'm on sabbatical this year, so I'll be around a lot. But I have a website, www.johnmurillo.com.
Okay, cool.
And
you don't play the social game, right?
Not really. I'm on Facebook, but hardly ever go on there.
Yeah.
But
too cool for school. Too lit. Too legit.
Too old.
Too lit to quit. So for coming on the show, brother, I gotta bless you with the lit pen.
My man.
Gotta get that camera time. Boom. Look at that. So that's yours.
That's sweet.
For being lit, you get a pen.
Word. Is it coming blue?
Nah. Come on, it's fine.
I rock this.
Come on. You gotta put that with the red. You gotta. So this is Yahdon Israel. We're here with John Murillo, and it's lit. Thank y'all for listening. We out.